Welcome to the Q Podcast.
Q is about conversation.
If we're really concerned about ending poverty, we've got to be more concerned about creating justice.
Our cultural products as Christians need to both defy and resonate with the culture.
And God's doing amazing things. His church is expanding, his church is growing.
It's not what's the purpose of my life, it's what is the purpose that's been assigned.
Stay curious, think well, advance good. This is Q.
Welcome to another edition of the Q Ideas Podcast. I'm Gabe Lyons, and today we are going to talk about tiny homes, and we're going to talk about design and minimalism, and we're going to talk about a new generation having a hard time affording homes and what that looks like. It's one of those cultural issues that if you've sat around long enough with somebody who's graduated from college or trying to design what their life's going to look like, these questions are coming up every single day. And so the couple we're going to talk to has such an interesting and fascinating story. They created something called Handcrafted Movement. You could follow them on Instagram. You could see, if you went there, some of the most beautiful handcrafted designed tiny homes that exist. Now, this tiny home movement that over the last decade has just taken off is becoming more and more popular as more and more people are looking for beautiful spaces but can't necessarily afford the square footage that maybe their parents could afford. And so in this environment, we're asking deep questions. And I asked Matt and Elizabeth Impola as I sat with them, what is going on with this movement? Why are people drawn to tiny homes? Why do you care so much about the design being so beautiful? Now, in the audio form that you're going to hear this podcast, it's hard to appreciate some of the design aesthetic, some of the ways in which they get creative in what they build. But if you go to Q Media, you can actually watch their talk, or you can watch clips from our Q Moments. And I would encourage you to check that out and watch this talk, because you'll see some of the designs and the beauty, or go to Instagram and follow along at Handcrafted Movement so you can just see what we're talking about. But the bottom line is this couple, who not only create together and design together and learn to work together, also give us some pretty deep thoughts about what this might mean about the way in which a new generation is going to think about community and think about what they really need to consume. Let's listen now.
So let's jump into why you do this. I mean, this idea of tiny homes and working with your hands, I know is something that comes from a childhood where that was a little bit a part of your life. So tell me a little bit about what motivated all this.
Yeah, I mean, my earliest memories were building tree forts and tree houses and just creating these little spaces for myself and my little friends. My dad was a contractor, and he would come home from work with just piles of extra materials, and I just saw that as such an opportunity to turn that into something cool. So I did that a lot of my childhood, but I would credit suburbia and education system with kind of killing my creativity a little bit. We moved to the suburbs, and that kind of dwindled as we did that in my teenage years. But it was around 2010 that I just felt an invitation from the Lord just to pursue that again and to pick up woodworking. So I went and bought a saw and a piece of wood and just started small. I made myself a longboard, one of those big skateboards. I cruised around on that thing, and I just had so many friends and family that wanted their own. And so I started making them for them. And then pretty soon that became a store. And then I kind of graduated to bigger furniture and tables and that sort of thing. And then it was about 2014 that I started to see these tiny homes kind of come on the scene, where people were starting to build houses on trailers. And I kind of thought that was silly, but at the same time I was intrigued because I was working in my family business. We build mass production neighborhoods, and I was just getting really burned out with that. And so I was really intrigued by these tiny homes. And I thought maybe I could build one for myself, maybe make a guest house or Airbnb for my own property. So I did that. It took me about a year to do my first one. And upon completing it, I just had so much fun with it. I thought maybe I'd sell this thing. So I put it online, and it just went viral and went around the world. And I kind of stumbled into that business.
How many tiny homes have you created at this point?
Kind of lost count. But yeah, the first 25 there I did right in my driveway. And then just started hiring guys, and from there got a warehouse. And then 2020, this girl came along. Some good things came out of 2020, and we got married, and she just brought a further level of depth and coziness to the spaces we're creating.
Well, they're truly beautiful. Anybody who sees them, I know they're like, can't believe these are little tiny homes. Elizabeth, you get to know these couples who are desiring these spaces, and it seems like there's more and more of this longing for tiny homes, which feels so opposite from where the progression seems to go for people. They want bigger, not smaller. We were talking to the Amish guy about that, right? It's like People now are, at least some segment of our population is going, I want to live small. What's going on there? What do you think's the motivations? What do you learn when you have these conversations with these new owners?
It's a great question. I think that it's been a long time in the making, actually. It's not just been a recent thing, but I think that it's accelerated it with the last few years being so turbulent that we've just really seen a lot of people are longing for this simplicity of their life. They're longing to like kind of strip back all of the clutter, all of the chaos, and all the noise that have been in their homes. And we've just seen that homes kind of turned more into this safe haven space where people want connection and community, and they want to have that right outside of their bedroom door. And so it's been cool that, especially with a remote workforce, that tiny homes kind of have expanded this whole new work from home thing, that you can work from home in the woods if you want and put a tiny house. You could work from home in Malibu in California. And so I think that it's really just expanded of what's possible. And I think it just brought kind of like everything that you need back to the home base. Yeah. And a lot of our tiny homes, they've been used as like getaways, as beach houses, as full-time dwellings. And also they've been really creatively used as like recording studios. So yeah, we've seen them not just for one purpose, but definitely for a variety of them.
And Matt, I know your background, you talked about the tree house. I'd love to see pictures of your tree houses. I bet those were amazing. Mine was pretty lame that I built when I was a kid. I bet yours was just epic. But as you were growing up, you grew up in more of a community life. I mean, you grew up a little differently than I think a lot of us, where there was community, and that was a big part of your life. And I know you guys, even for your wedding, built, like, didn't you build the barn or something that you guys were getting married in?
60 days.
Yeah. So like construction and working with your hands has been something that you came back to. But what is it about that, not only for you, but for people out here who maybe haven't had that experience of working with their hands? What started to connect with you? And when you're building, what does it do for you?
I mean, I think we see God introduce himself in the garden and invite us into creativity and collaboration to extend the boundaries. And that's always stuck with me. And we see God enter humanity through Jesus in the New Testament. And he was a humble carpenter and woodworker and hand worker before ministry. And so that's always stuck with me. And that's for myself. That's where I meet God the most. And where I feel his presence is in my wood shop, in my art studio, in nature. And I just think there's something magical about taking the raw materials that he's given us. So just taking wood and metal and glass and paint and just reforming that and reshaping that into something that's useful and beautiful for someone. So my goal or my vision is to create livable art, or art that you can live in. And I think the third thing is just that, that background of kind of an apprenticeship model where everyone was working hands-on and there was life-on-life learning. That's something that I've incorporated and look to further expand, is just this apprenticeship model. And I think these tiny homes have been a really cool little micro size of a larger house where you can have people come in, and in a very short amount of time, they can learn all of the skills and all the trades. So I've got guys that have flown in and lived with me and worked for me. And in 1 year, they can go from not knowing what a hammer and a nail is, and a year later, they can really be a master craftsman. And so we do all the work in-house, and 2 guys in 16 days can pretty much build one. And so they're doing the framing, and they're doing the electrical, and they're doing the building of the doors, all the different components. And so that's been really cool. I think I want to see definitely my generation, the millennial generation, and the next generation getting their hands dirty. So it's been a cool little opportunity.
I bet you're going to get some resumes sent in from that. I think, the idea of working with your hands is just so fulfilling. But there's part of this tiny home movement that I find really interesting, because it feels like we're moving into a moment where the next generation doesn't really see a future where they can even own a home. I know places like this town in Nashville, plenty of places in our country have seen pricing for housing just skyrocket. Yeah. And so it's actually been very discouraging to people to even have the opportunity to feel like they could even own a piece of property. Yeah. What do you believe maybe this tiny house movement could be doing to help a new generation even afford housing?
No, it's a great question as well. And it's something that we talk about a lot, actually. And we're personally relocating ourselves. And so it feels very personal at this point of being like, man, this is a whole different ball game. But I've seen in my own generation this growing struggle, like you said, of the idea of owning a home. It almost feels like now that's like retirement, or that's so far off. Or a lot of my friends have just abandoned that idea altogether, and they're totally content with renting. And I think that's something that we're really fired up about just expanding of like, what can that look like? How can we question the traditional housing? How can we look at more creative solutions like tiny homes? And I think we've seen them done in really creative ways. Like I said, of just back houses as multi-generational living. And we really do feel that, God's, I think, calling us into this multi-generational living and bringing back like family inheritances and family wealth through properties. And it's right now properties are so seen as investments and as large companies are just buying up homes by the thousand. But how can we restore that back to the family and community? And like we heard from the past talks of small communities, and tiny homes definitely provide a solution for that.
Yeah, and I'd ask you to, because you're the carpenter in there, like working on this, you help with design, but this idea of minimalism, it's come up a lot in the last few years, and people realizing that the less I have, the better I seem to be. Limited choices, right? And when you design, you're having to design these creative little pockets for storage, and people have to get rid of so many things. What's the beauty in minimalism?
Yeah, I think myself, the draw was I was designing 3,000 square foot houses, and now it's 300 square foot houses. So you're taking away 90% of that, and the 10% that's left, you got to make that useful and beautiful. And so it's kind of like if you have 100 shirts in your wardrobe, you got to pick your favorite 10, and if you have 50 dishes, you got to pick your favorite 5, and I think there's something, beautiful about that it allows your capacity in so many other areas of your life, relationships and time and budget, to be more opened up. So,
yeah, well, we love your guys' story and love as a couple, just working together, right? I mean, we see more and more couples that are trying to figure this out. Like, how do we get to spend the time together, even vocationally, to create, and the things that you're creating and putting into the world. I know you're just getting going. And so we're cheering you on and excited to see what God's got for you guys. So let's thank Matt and Elizabeth for being with us.
They are a fun couple, and I enjoyed so much this conversation with them. Again, go to Handcrafted Movement, check out what they're doing on Instagram, and follow along. What a great journey, a great story, a great couple. And I thought some of these deeper thoughts about community, about what it means to build together, about how we think about life together, and rethinking a lot of these formulations that we've just assumed were good. And I think this gives us a chance to maybe rethink a little bit of that. So I hope this was encouraging to you. I hope as you go out and design and do your own crafting movements this summer and build and create with your hands, that you take the time to appreciate all that does, not only for your environment, but what it does for your own soul. I hope you guys have a wonderful week and enjoy your summer.